Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on growth versus efficiency and finding the right balance. We're very excited to welcome you all today to join us for what will prove to be a very interesting panel in discussing all things, as Mero mentioned, data and efficiency, and when is the right time to ultimately grow your space. I'm joined by an all-star cast today, and I'm actually going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. Everyone is joining us from around the world. So actually, let's start off without any further ado. Johnny Rosenblatt, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi there. Yeah, very nice to be here. I'm Johnny Rosenblatt. I am the co-founder of SpaceMade. We're based in UK. We have 10 operational spaces, another 5 to open this year. We total about 230,000 square feet across our portfolio. And we're an entirely management agreement-based business. We've grown our business through partnerships solely with our landlord partners. And we've developed a brand that allows us to create individual brands that are appropriate for each building and each individual asset owner as well. So that's the business, and hopefully can give you a bit more insight further down the line.
Excellent. Thank you, Johnny. And we love that sign in the background. Next, our next guest is Jamie Russo of Everything Co-working, coming to us from the West Coast of the United States, where it is very early. Jamie, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Jamie Russo. I operated co-working spaces for 8 years and was the executive director of the Global Workspace Association, which is the industry association primarily focused on the US for the flex industry. And now I host 2 podcasts, the Everything Co-working podcast and the Flex Uncensored podcast, which I co-host with Giovanni Pallavicini. And now we're focused on helping operators launch and operate profitable co-working businesses. And we run programs like the Co-working Startup School and Community Manager University.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jamie. And Trina, who is joining us also from the West Coast of the US and the Director of Operations at Serendipity Labs. Trina, would you please introduce your background?
Yes, hi there. My name is Trina O'Neill. I'm Director of Operations at Serendipity Labs. I have a strong background in project management, and with Serendipity Labs, we have almost 30 co-working spaces across the US and in the UK. And, we provide, flexible office solutions, really hospitality centric hubs that attract both tenants and their employees.
Thank you, Trina. And certainly last but not least, my co-host.
Hey everyone, my name is Rado. I'm part of the Office R&D team for almost 6 years now. And during that period, I had the privilege to talk to hundreds of operators worldwide and actually try to help them implement technology that can both help them grow and achieve efficiency. So that's the perspective I'll be bringing to the panel today. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's go ahead and set the stage for what we're going to be speaking about this afternoon, morning, wherever you are joining us from here in the world. We are starting with our overall discussion around what is efficiency and what is growth. Basically comes down to a series of definitions that we look at, and they mainly fall into 3 main buckets. First and foremost is revenue efficiency, or money. Then there's employment efficiency. How is your team doing with their time? And then ultimately footprint optimization, or space. How are you doing with the optimization of your particular space? Finally, the question is, how do you market it? How do you take all of these things that are driving efficiency and ultimately put it into a package that you can then grow your business? When we look at the areas or the individual metrics that fill these 3 buckets, they really get brought into two areas. So it's efficiency metrics or marketing metrics. And you're going to be hearing quite a bit about these later on today with Miro and the team speaking about our data offerings. But for a few of you, let's just go through the top ones. Of course, occupancy. You need to know how many people are in your space at a given time and how much your space is generating for that particular time. time period, revenue per member, overall memberships, things that we always talk about when we're chatting about co-working spaces and whether or not they are efficient, whether or not they are optimized. Then we layer in the marketing metrics and what are the most important things to look at there. So what is our website traffic? How many form conversions are we driving? How many tours are we driving? And then ultimately, how many convert into members? And so we're going to chat through all of these in some capacity. You'll be hearing about this from our different panelists. But ultimately, we want to get to the question of when do we know when it's the right time for us to grow? When do we know it's the right time to scale from 1 to 3 or even beyond that into a franchise? So with that, let's turn it over to our panel and get some real life insight from the team here. So the first question, what metrics do you look at for optimization? What is your favorite go-to metric that indicates everything is really going very well? And I'm going to turn this question over to Johnny first, and then we'll move it on to Jamie and then Trina. So please, Johnny.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a pretty substantial question actually, because so much of what we do as a business and what every operator does is try to understand the detail behind everything that's going on in their business, and in a hospitality business like ours, there's a lot of detail. So for us, we are a partnership-based business. We operate alongside our landlord partners, and the key thing we decided when we started this business was that transparency would be critical to what we're doing, and that's something that happens across our business. But in relation to metrics, that's transparency to our landlord partners. So we have kind of a lot of key metrics that we share on a live basis with our landlord partners, and that gives them a real valuable insight into what's going on in the business and what's happening in their building. So really the obvious ones are, of course, office occupancy, hot desk sales, membership sales, all the different kind of areas. But we then go into kind of granular detail. So actually the metrics that we tend to share, which can kind of indicate our efficiency, and this is of course beneficial to our landlord partners, but also to us, because we get to look at each building individually. But we will share sales activity. So how many viewings at any given time are at the top of the funnel, and how many are booked in, and how many are kind of contract negotiation stage. Our landlord partners can see that live every day. That gets shared and is kind of fully available to them. We're then looking at kind of contracted revenue. We're tracking always the average desk rate, because we all know very well you can have 100% occupancy, but you can be selling at 20% of value. So actually really understanding not only the occupancy level, but the desk rate that sits behind that is really important. And you can see these upward trends. So when we're measuring it, we're looking at current day situation, but we're also, I suppose, looking at kind of what is projected, or what is kind of fixed almost, but from a projection point of view over the course of the next 12 months. So we're then kind of looking at a number of inquiries that are coming in. We look at website sessions per site, so we can understand exactly how that kind of input is coming. So if we know we've got to drive traffic for memberships in a certain location, we can start to drive that website traffic. We can see that there's a direct correlation. So all of that is on a very granular level and site by site level, and doing that across 10, soon to be 15 sites. There's a lot of detail that sits in that. But that all really kind of feeds into a bigger picture, whilst we have to kind of look at this from a corporate level. How is the business performing across the board? So all of those metrics feed in. So occupancy levels based on the different products that we have as well. So I can see right now what our private office revenue, our dedicated private office occupancy, dedicated desk occupancy, hot desk occupancy is looking like as sort of individual elements. And then we can track all those sales activities, occupancy activities, contracted revenue, and on a monthly basis rather, that kind of net member gain. So obviously some months we're losing members, but actually what's the net positive? It's very easy to look at we've attracted 150 new members this month. It's also important to know that you've lost 20, and therefore what's the net member gain? So all of these elements feed into it, but we really focus on, I guess, what we kind of call our North Star metric, which is just a very simple overview that all of this feeds into, but we have targets of number of members that we want to hit by the end of each quarter, and then by the end of the year. So it's a simplified way, but that metric allows us as a team, a team scattered around the UK of 45 people currently, we can all focus on that very, very key simplistic metric that allows us to focus on membership growth, and therefore we can kind of see where the growth is coming, and we can see how efficient we're being by feeding all that into it.
That North Star metric is so important to keep everyone aligned. That's great insight, Johnny. Jamie, I'm really interested to hear your answer to this question.
Okay, so I like this question. I think there's so much tension in this question because we're in a hospitality business, right? So I think in our business, there's the what sort of hits the bottom line, and so what is success in terms of numbers on an Excel spreadsheet that Johnny might be feeding to a landlord, and then there's how is the experience for a member. So I think I wonder if these sort of KPIs will shift over time as we become even more sort of hospitality focused with things like food and beverage. So my go-to metric, because I think this is really challenging because of this tension, is the revenue per square foot. I think operators dislike this metric because the best way to get to a high revenue per square foot is density, which I think is where, in terms of like, okay, let's fill the space with private offices, for example, which also will tend to make revenue per member go up. But that's not always the type of space or the type of vibe or feel that we want to operate. And I think that's where the tension will continue to come in. As you fill in food and beverage, for example, how do you monetize that to keep your revenue per square foot number up, but also increase the member experience, which drives the membership metric? So I think there's a lot there. I will say I think Johnny is almost lucky in a sense that he has such accountability with his landlord partners, because it forces you to track all of those metrics sort of relentlessly and puts that discipline. I think it's challenging for a lot of operators to have the discipline to focus on these KPIs over time. We like action, not necessarily tracking sometimes. So I like the management model for that reason, because it imposes that discipline.
So very true. And Sharina, your perspective here with so many locations, I've been interested to hear where your go-to metric is in all of this.
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what Johnny said in relation to, the visibility to landlords. And I think one thing for us that is really key is our member retention rate and our member satisfaction. So really looking at, looking to the members for some of our metrics for, after every 30 days of being with us, and then every 6 months, making sure that along the journey that they remain satisfied and that we have that, high member retention rate that really, can lead to long-term stability. So using things like, Net Promoter Score to really dig into, what, our clients, our members, promoters of us, and we want to make sure that they are, and that they're highly satisfied with the product and service that we're offering to others. So I think it's a real, we want to make sure we have promoters of our business, people that recommend us to their colleagues, friends, and that they're as enthusiastic about the business as we are.
Absolutely. And we'll get into that. That is nicely segueing into marketing, which is a few questions from now. But I am going to move into a little bit of a different take on efficiency metrics, and more into the heart of our panel today is: what trade-offs have you made, or sacrifices have you made for efficiency, or any type of does efficient mean that you are sacrificing your growth? Do we think? And I'll start with Jamie first, and then we'll do Trina and then Johnny. So Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Yeah. Again, I think there's always tension here. To me, you don't want to grow until you uh, sort of nailed your efficiency in terms of identified like what trade-offs you're comfortable with in terms of your business model. Everybody has a slightly unique business model and what's important to them, and what success looks like from a bottom line and an experience perspective. But I think in terms of unit model, make sure that you have success and you've pushed through the things that you need to work on to create efficiency, or at least where optimization can be made in the second space. I would guess everybody who's listening who has more than one location will say, okay, here's what I learned out of space one, and just being tracking those KPIs so that you know where your gaps are and can design for those into the next location. I think one of the challenges of our business is a lot of those efficiencies come from floor plan and from, plan design. What are we selling? Are we selling high-end event space? Are we selling private offices? Like, what drives our revenue? And you can learn a lot from that first location in terms of what you thought the world would look like and what it actually looks like. And so really kind of fine-tuning some of those things in before you grow, but also not waiting too long to grow, because also in our business, sort of that bottleneck to growth is the real estate piece and the real estate acquisition or partnership development. So I think there's a little bit of doing both at the same time, but make sure you have a unit model that works before you go to that next location.
Absolutely. I think we could probably do an entire session on what we thought the world would look like versus what it is actually looking like, just to play off of that point. Trina, would you like to give your thoughts next?
Yeah, I think, I agree with what Jamie said. It's like really, efficiency is a precursor to growth, I believe, really making sure that you have, scalable operations, that, you have built and implemented like processes that really serve both your team and your members. We did a lot with automating systems for, to improve the member onboarding process, making sure that, we're delivering on a turnkey solution that, members can come into our space and really, be able to start operating within, 10 to 15 minutes of being there, that, our team are prepared with the onboarding processes, and just making sure that, we've kind of really streamlined those administrative processes, and, really established that kind of, ability to offer really flexible membership plans, and being able to really to scale that, and I think like through focusing on the member experience and prioritizing that, it's really helped us to kind of to really highlight where our efficiencies need to be, and where to focus our efforts to automate, because I think any system that you go to, any new system, it's always a hurdle to kind of figure out when's the right time, and to really make sure that you know what you want from the start, that you kind of visualize the data that you're going to get out of it at the end, and you can really use that to grow and build your businesses.
And you really can't go wrong when your foundation is prioritizing the member experience. So that's a really important thing to note too, from taking away from your answer. I'll turn it over to you next, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, panels are really boring when everyone agrees with each other, but I do totally agree with Jamie and Trina, because I think there's so much you can do when you learn from the experience of that kind of first space and then second space. And every one of our spaces gets better and better because you iterate and you find you find those kind of you find the things that work, and you go long on those, and you strip out those areas that you thought might work but never quite do. And I think that's just comes with experience and with iteration. So space one is never going to be perfect. It's probably always going to be, you know, the space that you love the most in some way, but like it's never going to be perfect, and you've kind of got to learn and iterate. And I think sort of just from a question around that efficiency and growth, you know, very often, you know, we look at hundreds of buildings, and you can make any building work on spreadsheet. You know, you can make any building look right and stack it up with offices. But you know, as soon as you've done that and you've walked that floor plan, if you ever got to build something like that, it never works. You can never sell the space. You're always left with space. So you've got to get that mix. And going back to that point about member experience, you've got to get that mix of sort of, you know, active kind of revenue driving space versus that sort of, you know, giving over space to create a better space for your members. I think just I wanted to pick up just actually on that kind of question about efficiency. Does efficiency mean you're sacrificing growth? I think I just kind of was thinking about this actually as the others were speaking, and one area just from a systems perspective that actually has been a really interesting one, and a real life example, but and I promise you Miro has not paid me to say this, but we changed over to Office R&D last year, and actually as a business decision that was a pretty major decision, because we had to look at the benefits, we had to look at the kind of, you know, what we were going to lose, and we had to look at the time that it was going to take to get there. So actually in the end we realized that we were going to get longer term a better, more reliable system that was going to be easier for our community managers to use, and that actually was beneficial to the business. The problem was it was going to take us 6 months to get there, and it was going to have a cost implication. But you know, those elements, those decisions are really important when you get to a certain stage of business, because actually you're looking at driving efficiency. And if you're operating on a system that maybe isn't as efficient, it might work, it might be clunky, you might sort of accept it a little bit, but actually you know that for that longer term growth you kind of need to make those changes. So actually that was a really difficult decision to make, but it was a worthwhile decision longer term.
As they tend to be, those technology decisions tend to be a little bit rougher than some others. However, let's chat with Rado for a minute. He's going to give us a little bit more insight in terms of what some of our other customers are seeing at Office R&D in relation to this question.
Yeah, I think I probably have an interesting observation to share on this specific question. For the majority of my time since the beginning of the year, I'm involved in an initiative we started that aims to help operators sell more efficiently online and through different channels. Mm-hmm. And while doing the discovery phase for this initiative, we actually find out that a lot of operators find it necessary to some extent to sacrifice efficiency, operational efficiency in particular, in the expense of growth from their existing inventory and maximizing sales and revenue from existing inventory. And that's interesting to observe. A lot of this is mainly related to a lot of manual and labor-intense efforts that operator invest in order to sell their wall commitment and on-demand products, mainly online. And as a technology provider that sits between the operators and their customers, I would say that there is a huge field there for us to explore and actually help operators balance better between growth and efficiency when it comes to maximizing revenue from already opened and working locations.
Goes a little bit back to what Johnny was just saying. So it's we have a process, but it's not working horribly, but it's working. And so should we focus on that, or should we focus on fixing that and spending our time there, or focus on growth and getting more customers, getting more members? So it's always a healthy balance. So for the next, we're going to shift over into what is, of course, my favorite topic, marketing. And I've been waiting for the answers to this particular question all week. So we'll start with Trina, actually. So what is the most impactful marketing tactic that your team uses at Serendipity Labs?
I think here at Serendipity Labs, we really focus on like community building, and making sure that we are real promoters in our community and fostering those connections with, you know, local chambers, you know, any networking groups, you know, within our community and beyond, and, you know, hosting our community within our spaces to not only build and grow the network of our members, but that of the community as well, and really showcasing you know, our hospitality and our spaces, and ensuring that people can really feel that they can come and use it and make, you know, real connections, you know, and you know, we do that through our you know, our member events, as well as our partnership events that I just referred to there. And you know, I think that also ties into like our referral programs as well. You know, like I said before, yes scores, and you know, encouraging really word of mouth referrals from our members. We have, you know, a member referral program as well as a broker referral. So just really making sure that we're honing into that, and you know, leading to organic growth, as well as that of online presence.
People go where they feel welcome in a community. It's the most powerful, I think. Johnny, I'll have you go next.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to identify the kind of most impactful marketing tactic, because it depends what you're trying to sell at any given time. It depends what you're trying to focus on. For us, you know, it can be individual locations, or it can be, you know, the big picture. It can be event spaces. So it's hard to identify. We do a lot of kind of, you know, always on digital marketing. So that will be, you know, that's Google ads, Instagram ads, LinkedIn. We focus a lot on that element. I think there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of time and energy and frankly cost that goes into it as well. But it's a necessity to drive business and continually remind people of where you are. I did, as you asked me this question, I think you asked me just for a couple of examples, but one campaign that we had recently, it was sort of towards the beginning of the year. We operate a mixture of spaces, so kind of close to home locations, city center locations, regional city locations as well. But we wanted at the beginning of the year, in January, sort of post Christmas, just to have this real push on our close to home locations. And for us, you know, digital's always on, but the impact came from, I think, what is kind of an old school tactic of ours, which we've, you know, has been going for years. But we went really long on like kind of billboard advertising, and we took across London, close to we took a couple of hundred bus stops. So you know, in the UK, kind of very strong kind of presence across bus stop locations, and we did a real kind of like tongue-in-cheek campaign around what it is just to work locally, to be in the space. So it was sort of a play on, you know, working from home, but actually working near home. And we decided to really kind of push that that sort of that narrative, and it was incredibly effective. And you know, almost going back to the question you asked at the beginning, but you know, in terms of tracking our metrics, we saw off the back of that campaign, it was a 2 or 3 week campaign, but we saw a huge shift. Oh, there you go, you've got some pictures. That's me on a cold, wet January morning in my beanie. But we saw this huge drive in website traffic, in inquiry levels, and then as a result in conversions off the back of, you know, a number of activities. But this campaign was particularly meaningful, was particularly impactful, and it worked. It was a simple message. It was clean. It was straightforward. And actually, for us, that was an example of just a really impactful, powerful marketing tactic that kind of got our message across the line.
And don't we love it when a campaign just works? Isn't that the best? Jamie, I'll have you go next, please.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that, because yeah, my answer was going to be the one that works. And I think I also think there's a marketing framework for when you're trying to fill a space, and then a marketing framework for when you're sort of maintaining membership. So I think digital can be really critical, and it depends on the market you're in, right? Johnny and Trina are in major markets where digital is going to make sense. And there's a lot of competition, so it's almost a requirement, and you have to have budget for that, and you have to plan for that. And to Johnny's point, sort of always on, and oftentimes that's needed to really fill the space, because if you have X number of offices or hot desks to fill, you got to kind of generate those leads, and getting to cash flow sooner rather than later is going to make the ROI work on those campaigns. And then after that, I think it's what draws in your members, experimenting and tracking and knowing what works. I love that bus stop example. It was probably expensive and probably felt like a risk, when you launched the campaign, and it's really creative, and it worked. And so now it's something that you might repeat, or do iterations of, or repeat every so often. But I think being willing to experiment with things like that, and then not forgetting the very simple tactics. I actually often sort of dismiss the member referral piece, because I feel like you have so much less control over it. But Trina, I love that you keep bringing that up in terms of like net promoter score and member experience, and really ensuring that your members are kind of equipped to make those referrals, and keeping it top of mind for them to refer others to the space. I think when you have a really great member experience, and maybe a little bit of a unique product or a unique experience, folks are more likely to talk about it to their friends, and that's free, essentially, right? Because you're building in long-term or lifetime value. Your lifetime value goes up when the member experience is strong, which can also speak to that efficiency question that you asked. Like, efficiency can also be important to member experience. Like Trina, you talked about member onboarding, like having that really strong experience in the first 30 days or so can really drive that efficiency for long-term lifetime member value. But I think being willing to experiment and figure out what works. So I think we've seen some good examples here.
Definitely. So in our last few minutes, we have about 4 minutes left in this session, I'm going to ask another highly anticipated question, one that we actually could do another whole session on, but I'm going to throw this out to our panel and ask the advice of what would you give to someone, advice that you would give to someone who is growing their co-working business and taking it to the next level. So there's a lot of different levels that we could talk about here, and I know you all have experience at different levels. So I'll really be interested to hear your unique viewpoints on this. But I'll start off with Trina, please. I'll have you go first, and then we'll move on to the rest of the group.
Yeah, I think for me, it would be really like, embracing technology to help you understand your member base. You're really leveraging it to enhance the experience, and to look at how can, if you're ready to grow and scale, like how can you do that in an efficient and streamlined way. So really having processes that you can replicate and build and grow, and that they really stay streamlined and stay efficient, and obviously as you grow, you learn from every experience, you build on that, you evaluate and you analyze, but just really having those smart solutions that you can grow with. I think one thing we've seen recently is that a typical requirement for, say, 50 people, in the past it might have opened up like a 10,000 square foot lease, but now 50 people could share 25 desks, and just using the technology that you have to be able to really be flexible about the memberships you offer, and to really understand how you're going to operationalize that and really push it forward is kind of one of my.
Thank you, Trina.
Technology to be flexible. Yeah.
Thank you. Rado, do you have anything from our customer base that you've seen over the last few months with your research into some of our growth technologies that we're building right now?
Yeah, I think probably the thing that I can add to this specific question in my experience with Office R&D so far is that there are probably two common traits between operators who scale successfully. The first one, in my opinion, is how complex their business model is. And the more complex the model, the business model is, the harder it is to scale the team, to scale the processes, et cetera, et cetera. So the first common trait for me is like being able to simplify the business model in a way that it is sufficient to meet the demand of your customers, but also allow you to scale processes, teams, and locations, and therefore your business. And the second common trait that I'm noticing between operators that scale more successfully is the customer centricity. Trina mentioned that a couple of times. Jamie also talked about it. So yeah, that's probably the second point, being customer obsessed and customer centric in order to be able to scale and have that word of mouth referral benefit and organic traffic to your space.
Absolutely, yes. Jamie, I'll have you go next, please.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this short because I bet Johnny has a lot to add here. I think the first thing I'd say is that it's not easy, I think, in our industry to scale because you, as an owner in the first location, are wearing a lot of hats. And then, to even add a second location, then you're sort of, you can't cut yourself in half. And so I think this is where the efficiency piece really comes into play, and having the right technology and the right processes in place while that may feel sort of unsexy while you're thinking about growth. Having a team with the tools in place that can kind of operate like self-sufficiently while you focus on scaling will be a necessity. I think if I was going to give some advice, I would say be careful about reverse engineering what you think is working for others, because they may not be scaling in a way that's profitable or sustainable kind of at these beginning stages. You might see people adding, Johnny and Trina probably have bigger teams because they have a lot of locations. But I think one of the big tensions when you're growing from 2 locations to 5 locations is like, okay, well, when do we start to centralize things? When do we hire a central marketing person? And that can be hard to add to the P&L and amortize over a couple of locations versus 10 locations or 30 locations. So I think being really intentional, being conservative, but knowing when to lean in and sort of take that risk, which I think Johnny will talk a little bit about. But I would say, just have some advisors who can help you think through these things and help when the right time is to sort of like lean into those expenses. Because I think it is challenging with our business. It's not a super high margin business, to know, kind of how to scale appropriately without sort of going overboard and having overhead that you can't support if you haven't scaled quickly enough to sort of support that overhead.
So many great things, but the reverse engineering, I think, is one of the most important pieces. Just because someone else is doing something well in a certain way doesn't mean that tactic might work for you, and some didn't work for them that will work for you. So it's always an interesting thing for everyone to take their own journey. Johnny, actually, we'll have you end on your journey and some of your thoughts about that, please.
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting question. This is now the second business I've built in co-working sort of space, and I think there are so many variants that kind of create different environments. I would say that in my view, 1 to 2 is probably the hardest. 0 to 1, you know what? You've got to be naive. You got to be like, you got to go for it. You got to be able to take that risk, and you know what? You go at it with heart and soul, and you've got to build that kind of. You got to build everything from scratch. And 1 to 2 is tricky, and then once you kind of get past that and you get to 5 and beyond that, it becomes a little bit of a flywheel. But what I would say is I think the key is being able to kind of take calculated risks. I think you've got to know when there's a good deal and when there's a bad deal. You've got to know, actually, you've got to slightly go with your gut very often, because actually you can always talk yourself out of doing another building. You can always talk yourself into doing another building, but your gut instinct's pretty good. And I think hiring is key. You know, when my co-founder Dan and I started SpaceMade, you know, we sort of did everything, right? And you know, we went from being front of house to head of marketing to head of sales to operations to finance. And bit by bit, as you get better and you get bigger, you hire behind you. So you fill those kind of roles with people that frankly can do those individual roles a lot better than you can. And then it's about giving direction. But I think, you know, it's easy to say hire great people. I think my mindset has always been to hire sort of startup minded people. There's a very different process between, you know, you can bring in a head of marketing or a head of sales who want to just go and do, you know, big deals or have a big budget. But actually you want someone at that early stage who is prepared to roll their sleeves up and go and sell a 2-person office, or go and do that tour for, you know, a co-working membership, because they just want to get the deal done. They want to drive forward. So I think getting the mentality of the right person is really, really key. And once you do that, you kind of can create this sort of the right culture around those people. And then you really have to look after people, I think, is the key. And from there, things start to blossom. You know, the model's got to be right, the locations have got to be right. But actually, if you've got the right team of people who are really focused on it, then you know, success is a lot easier to find on that basis.
Absolutely, yes. Well, with that, we are out of time for this particular topic, but I do want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Johnny, Jamie, Trina. You have had so many great insights. Hopefully they were helpful to our audience members today. I know they will be. And we very much appreciate you participating with us today and joining us for Flex World 2024. Appreciate it very much.